Okay, next on the stage we will have a talk about how Generation Z will disrupt your business forever. And this will be presented by Mr. Rogier Croes, Chief Digital Officer at MEC Global. Let's come on stage.
Can you hear me? Is it working? Yes. Can you hear me well? All right. Well, great to be here. I'm going to speak with you in the next 20 minutes about kids and technology. So you will not see a lot of slides with graphs and stuff. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a brainwave of myself, something I'm very passionate about. And I think if you have children, yourself, then probably this is something that you will recognize a lot of. Because I'm going to speak about the Generation Z, and I see a lot of presentations about Generation X, Generation Y, but I think there's not such a big impact as the Generation Z, which is actually kids like this. And I want to start off with a very small movie for you, which will actually give you a nice demonstration of where these kids, in the world these kids are born in. Can you play the first movie, please? So you must probably recognize this. This is a 1-year-old sitting with an iPad. You could see how easily it was already moving around on the iPad, and then they give the kid a magazine. And what actually happens is that the child actually starts swiping in the magazine, expecting that they can do the same thing. And actually, this is a much longer movie in which the child gets really, really ignored. They're really annoyed by the fact that they cannot swipe in the magazine, right? And it's interesting to think what happens when these kids grow up in a world like that. And that's why I want to speak about these two kids. These are my own. They're 8 and 11 years old, and they're growing up in a total different world. And I'll give you a little bit of some background on this. They have a very tech-savvy father, I have to admit. I'm a little bit of a Kickstarter junkie. I like to buy all kind of new stuff. And it's interesting for me to see how they interact with that. Just to be very clear, they still play outside. They still like to play outside. It's not that they're on their iPad the whole day. But it's interesting to see how they move around on this. Because they watch zero television. Nothing. They never put the television on. Because they watch content on their iPad. So it's not about the size of the screen for them. It's about having control over what they want to look at. And I tell you something, I'm in the advertising business, but really honest, they hate advertising already. They don't like it if they have to wait for an ad before they actually can see the content. Sometimes they tell me which brands they see as a pre-roll on YouTube, and they're already complaining about that. Right? So you really, for brands, it's a really different world to be able to connect with people like this. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples on that. Who's actually influencing these kids? It's this guy, for example. This is a vlogger in the Netherlands who has more than 1 million people watching his vlog every day, and that's 30 minutes of airtime. 30 minutes of them watching this guy who's on his bike, going to the bakery, filming himself, and if I look at what he's doing, I don't understand it. Really, I don't understand it. Every time I watch for like 10 seconds, I think like, what the hell are you guys looking at this? But I started to think, well, if I don't get it, that's maybe not the right reference to say, you should not watch it because I don't get it, right? It's a different way of what they like to watch. They like to be in control of what they're actually watching. But it's interesting because if this guy puts on a t-shirt like that, my kids will come to me and say like, I would like to have a t-shirt like that. So he has a massive influence on their brand preference. Right? And it's interesting, because for them, these are the heroes of this time. If they have to make a project for school, and this was already when my little boy was 6 years old, he had to make a project for school, and normally you will have like, years ago, you had the encyclopedia where you were looking up stuff. Now he knows he can take his iPad, he can press the red button in Google, and he will is able to ask any question in the world, and he will always get an answer. That's his starting point of thinking. He will have access to any information in the world. He had to make a project about Ferrari. And he went to the iPad and he pressed fastest Ferrari in the world. Boom, it's there. Most expensive Ferrari in the world. Boom, it's there. Right? Instant information, anything in the world. That's his starting point. As I said, they don't watch television. They only watch content on YouTube. And I think that's a big shift also. They watch Netflix, and we had to make a long flight last year. And my little boy came to me and he said, Daddy, can I watch Netflix in the plane? I said, no, you can't have Netflix in the plane because we don't have Wi-Fi in the plane. And he said, but wait a minute, that's weird because on their website it says TV shows, movies, anytime, anywhere. So that's not true. Good point, right? He was expecting this. I photoshopped this myself, but just to illustrate. But it's interesting to think about. And Netflix is an international MEC client. I spoke with Netflix about it, and even they said, yeah, it's quite a point there, right? Their expectations are very different in that. If you give them a smartphone, when my oldest became 10 years old, and she got the first smartphone, an old iPhone, and I actually saw what she was doing with the iPhone. What's funny, because she was playing games with it, she was watching YouTube, she was communicating with friends, etc. But actually we got her the phone, so when she was going out and going to play with someone, and we wanted to call her to let her know, like, listen, what time she has to be home, I tried that 5 times. She never ever picked up the phone. Never. Why? Because the phone is actually at the house. The phone is too clumsy for her to sort of take with her. So they don't use the phone for calling. The phone is for a lot of other stuff. But she uses the phone different than the iPad. She's very good also in multitasking, having the iPad next to the phone, doing stuff at the same time. And again, I'm quite a techie guy, but I don't get it. I'm looking at it and thinking, if this generation becomes bigger and becomes the consumer of the future, are you brands ready for this? Right? How are you going to connect with these people? Last year when the Apple Watch came out, I have to admit, I was happy like a little boy. Apple Watch came out, it's not even on my wrist anymore. I wore it for like 2-3 months, tested it out. It's a little bit tricky, but I didn't see the added value out of it. I should be careful because people might still see it. I do see a very big market for smartwatches, actually for kids, different thing. But what was funny is that when I got it, and I think it was the second day, and my daughter was standing behind me, and she looked on the Apple Watch, and they loved it. And she looked I was just playing around on it, and at one point she said, "Hey, Daddy, that's cool. You can even watch time on it." I think that's funny, right? They never thought about watching time on the watch. The watch was for a lot of other things first, and that watching time was somewhere at the end. And it's funny if you give kids access to this kind of technology. And I actually want to show you the following movie. It's from Kids React. I don't know if you know this channel on YouTube, but you should really look it up. Kids React, and it gives children access to technology, old and new technology, and you see their responses. So I want to show you the following movie. Can you play it, please?
Walkmans! Oh, what phone? Oh, what is this thing? I have no idea what it is. What is this? I don't get what it is.
What do I do? Press play?
I don't know what it does. What are you talking about?
You gotta be kidding me.
Nope. How did you put it in? I am not going to give up. I'm a survivor. Okay, I give up. You can't run with this. You're only going to be like this by the end.
Whew, this is really heavy.
I'll be like, oh my God.
Apple Watch!
You're going to be reacting not to old technology, but to new technology.
New stuff.
Which is this.
Can I keep it?
It's cool.
Is this something that counts your steps?
A mini iPod Nano. Kind of looks like it's like from the future. The future watch.
The Apple Watch. Is this the Apple Watch?
I'm speechless.
Wait, is there any games? No, there's not. That's boring. It has trivia. I'm playing that. I don't care if you guys won't let me. I'm playing it. You're calling me.
Hello?
It does not sound like you. What is going on?
You're on the phone with the watch. What would you expect a smartwatch to be able to do?
The same thing as a smartphone.
Play games, but since it's a watch, I wouldn't really want it to play games. I don't know, really. I didn't see the commercial exactly because it was an ad. And who likes ads?
So with this Apple Watch, a lot of the function will not work unless you also have an iPhone 5 or later.
Really? Wow. That's terrible.
Now it's useless. If you forget your phone, you just have the watch on, like, what are you gonna do?
You waste all of your money, and you find out you need to have an iPhone. It's like dreams crushed. If you're walking in the street, like on the yellow line, instead of stopping and the cars honk at you and be so rude, you can just go, and then you start walking.
Funny, huh? Sort of recognizable, right? It's also interesting to see how the marketing of Apple works, right? It's Apple Watch, like, Apple Watch. They already love the brand. And I said, there's a lot of those movies, and it's really interesting to see how kids react to this. Another thing is about Wi-Fi. Very interesting, I think. We are now in a world where we get in places, we look if there's Wi-Fi, if you can connect. I believe that in a couple of years, we will not have that anymore. This will be automatically connecting devices to a network which is out there. I mean, my kids go in the car and even ask me, why don't we have Wi-Fi in the car? Yeah, good question. I was actually flying from Amsterdam yesterday, and they said that we had Wi-Fi on the plane, which actually didn't work. It's really crappy. Another thing what happens is, I have been on a plane and they asked me to pay $10 for Wi-Fi, which I think is ridiculous, right? You're asking someone to pay like $1,000 for a ticket, and then you're going to sell for $10 Wi-Fi? Why not give it for free? I can assure you that if it would come from Google or Facebook, it would be free. You would definitely not pay that $10 for Wi-Fi. It would just be service. Now think about if you have kids and you actually go on a holiday destination, you get to the destination, and one of the first questions they're probably going to ask, what's the Wi-Fi password? Imagine that you say, well, we have good news for you. There's no Wi-Fi here. Great holiday, right? And as I said, these companies are very important in this also. I mean, they have their projects like internet.org and Project Loom from Google, but they're not crazy, right? Providing internet for the whole world also means that more people get online, which means more people click on their ads, which means more money for them, right? Let's not be naive in this. But it's good. We also profit from this situation, right? And as I said, for kids growing up very small now, this will be a very different situation. They have very different thinking, and they have very different expectations. And I want to talk a little bit about education now. I don't have a degree on anything in education. It's just something that I'm passionate about and that I see myself. And it's interesting to see that actually the reform in education is going very, very slowly. I have to say that my kids now work with a tablet at school, which is great. So they do some stuff on the tablet, and the teacher can actually look centrally how things are going. But I think that kids should be working much more in groups and much more being prepared for, I would say, the real business life it comes after. And I see a lot of things happening which I'm sort of concerned about, but also, well, I think it's interesting to look into. And one of these is this, the educational cookie. So I see now that if kids growing up, they do all the stuff on paper, but if you would do more digitalized, and you would actually start following the patterns of how kids are learning, and it's actually the same as we do with advertising. We drop you a cookie, we gather a lot of information about you, and once we want to target you, we can do that very specifically based on the information we have built up in the last couple of years. Why not do the same in education? So that would mean that you start collecting a lot of digital information about how my kids are learning, and the moment that actually you want to teach them French, you would not just say, this is how you learn French. No, you would say, okay, based on your history, this is the way how we can teach you French in the best way. Right? And then you would get personalized learning in a very social way, because the social part is still very, very important here. We should not underestimate the fact that with all this technology, that there's also a risk that people will be less socialized, right? And I think that is very important that you combine these two elements together. And then that's why it's interesting to think about how these kids actually would be working in different groups and still make full use of technology. Another thing that I'm seeing, and this is a very old report card that I want to use as an illustration, is that the focus in education is a lot of times on weakness. So if you're not good at writing, you have a 6-, but you're very good in talking, you have a 10, then actually the next time you have to go to school and speak about your kids, they're probably going to speak about the writing part, right? They're not very good at that. We have to put more focus on it. And I had my last conversation at school and I said, no. Why not put full focus on the thing that they are very good at? Right? Focus on something they're really good at instead of the weakness. And it's typical because it also has to do with the mentality and the way how the world we live in. And it's an interesting one. That they should focus more on the talent than they should focus on the weakness. You know this chart? We've all been forced to learn this, the elements. But I mean, how many people actually use this in their daily life? Right? There's another thing. If you look at all the stuff that kids have to learn, you could call this basic knowledge, but you could also say, well, but who's actually using this? So you could actually argue that there's too much of basic knowledge, which is not actually basic knowledge, and you should spend more time on other areas. For example, this. I actually saw this also out there, not from Little Bits, but from another company which is here. And Little Bits is actually prototyping for kids. And what it does is it's a company who actually made you have magnets, all these things you can put together, and you can build your own electronic circuit. Very simple, battery on one side, a buzzer on the other side, and buzzer goes off. Then you can put something in between, you have a switch, you can have all these different things in between. And it's interesting because it learns the kids something that they would normally not learn at school. It's a very, very powerful toolbox. And if you give this to kids, you put it on the table, it's like Lego, but they put it together and they build the most extreme things with electronic circuits. Very nice. Another one is coding. Scratch. You should look it up. I give this to my kids, I let them play around with it. It's not that they're doing everything, but they started making a small movie with coding, and they learn the basics of coding. Our global CEO of WPP, our holding company, always says if you want to learn 2 things in the future, it has to be coding and learning to speak Chinese. Maybe he's right. But I think coding is very interesting if you see how fast kids can actually pick this up. Then about job expectations. How do you think that goes? When these kids actually come to your office, they have very different expectations about what a job is and what their career could be. They're not starting a job to think, I'm going to work here for the next 40 years. No, they're coming there thinking, well, let's see how it is, and I might move over in 6 months. It's very interesting to think about that. And also how these kids are interviewed, for example, I think should really evolve. This is one of the things we're looking into now. It's called NEC, and it's a company who actually makes gamification of recruitment. So what they do is that they say, okay, what are you as a company? They have an interview with you as a company. They build a game, and you actually ask people to, when to apply to your job, you ask them to actually play the game to figure out if they fit with your company. You should look into it. Minecraft, very interesting. Kids playing Minecraft. I could still not understand why the graphics are so crap, but they love it. Works very well for them. And it's interesting to see what kids can build with digital Lego. This is actually what Microsoft is doing now with HoloLens. So you've seen the VR out here, the virtual reality glasses, but even Microsoft now has made these glasses, and you can actually project this on your kitchen table. So you can build something on your iPad, you can project it on your kitchen table, and you can walk around it. It's really interesting. What if you can print it in 3D? So you develop something on your iPad, a structure, and you can 3D print it, and actually you can send it to your house in Lego blocks. You can build it with your friends. This is happening now also. 3D printing, you've seen it here very small, but the technology is already there to 3D printing a house. So potentially, these kids now learn very small to build 3D structures. They can print them, but they can probably also design their own houses in the future and 3D print it. You know how fast it goes to make this? In 24 hours, you have printed the structure of a house. 24 hours. That will probably disrupt the whole building industry. And then there are a lot of other stuff. You could argue, these small kids, do they still need to have a driver's license? Do they need to fly? You should look this up. E184, an actual one-person flying drone. VR, you should try out the Vive here, the VR experience. I just tried it out. It was amazing. It's really, really powerful. And then it's about having all these devices connected. The Internet of Things, they just spoke about it also. It's very interesting how these kids will just assume that all these devices will be talking to each other in one way. All right, just to close it off. So what is my role in all of this? Because I'm looking at this and I throw all this information at you, going from one side to the other. But what I try to do, as a parent also, I try to do the following. I try to find the passion of my kids. I try them to experiment with lots of different things. Technology-wise, but it could also be if they say, hey, maybe I should play the guitar, I try to at least give them a guitar in their hands and play around with it. Because in the end of the day, I think that, if they will be able to find their passion and write their own stories, I think that's what life is all about. I want to leave you with this, and thank you. And if you have any questions or anything you want to speak about, I'm still around, but I'm more than happy to talk with you more about this. Thank you very much.